Alright, welcome folks. I'm going to go through the process of setting up the music in Fmod. Just the basic approach to it. I'm not going to kind of take it really far, but I will go through what the events sort of look like, what they are, and make sure that everything is fairly clear. I'm just seeing some things that are in there. Sometimes when you duplicate events, you copy across things you don't want. So I'll be going through stuff like this. And the basic idea, this is going off the guide. Of course, this is prone to change. But the basic idea is that we have this music aggro event, which is a dynamic event that changes based upon if the enemies have aggro. So it is using a parameter, and that parameter will change depending on what creature is actually aggroed, meaning chasing the player. So as it is now, 1 will come through when the Chomper is aggroed, and 2 will come through when the Grenadier is aggroed, and 3 when the Spitter. So if you have different enemies in the same place, the kind of the more powerful enemy will pass the higher value. So that means we can control what kind of threat level the music is playing at, and make sure that it responds accordingly. So it's just a standard continuous parameter named music, and I'll have it 0 to 4. It is global though, so we can control it from anything in the game if we want to set up some triggers from different areas later on. So that's the parameter, and it's in as a parameter sheet, but I do have everything on the timeline here because yeah, I'm running things from the timeline. And what will happen is that this music aggro event will be playing when the level loads. So if I just go into the project, I'll just show you how the event is actually, it's just kind of dragged into the main area where the character spawns, and it's just set to start automatically. I don't think there's anything particularly fancy going on there. You should be able to see it in the main scene view as long as you've got that gizmo option enabled. You can enable it in the main game view as well. So when you drag an Fmod event in to Unity, it just appears like this, and you're able to do different things to it. So let me just see if I actually press play. Oh yeah, here it is. So I've just got a music event. Basically, I've just dragged in the music event from this Fmod event window. I've just dragged in music aggro, and I've just set the Fmod emitter to object start, and it's going to destroy as well. And it's pointing to the event. Now, this is the script that I'm sharing with you on the Fmod Unity guide. And I've added this script on to this event because this is the main music aggro event. And this is the script that is essentially listening for all those different changes from the characters. So this is it's a work in progress, but I think it's working pretty well right now. You can just copy this into, well, make a new script called Music Manager and make sure it's bolted into this emitter that you drag in. Then you can just leave it there, and that's all good. It should receive all those different values. And of course, you can see what the script is doing if you just open it up if you're interested how it actually works. But essentially, it passes 1 for Chomper, 2 for Grenadier, and 3 for the Spitter. So let's just get rid of Visual Studio, and I'm just going to show you what the event actually does in Fmod. Of course, you can play the event in Fmod, and it will essentially simulate exactly what's going to happen in Unreal, which is nothing. So let me just double check here what I've got going on. Okay, so yeah, what's happening here is you'll see a number of these green regions, and you'll see blue regions, and you'll see some markers with tags. So this is the basic approach to setting up music. It can be much more complicated than this, but I thought it might be useful to just show you this basic horizontal approach. So the playhead will start to move Let me just see if I have a sound effect that says start, or I think it's spawn. I have some test sound effects that are on the Google Drive. And let me just put this in here, and you'll just hear that hopefully that'll come through.
Stinger spawn.
Yeah, I have some reverb on it just to make it sound, just for testing, just for fun. So the event plays when you spawn in.
Stinger spawn.
Now I don't actually want to use the stinger audio at all in this, because we've got some separate events that we're going to use for stingers, and the reason for that is just to keep things really simple. We don't need to have the stingers in the main music aggro event. So a stinger is like a short incidental bit of music that just plays like a one shot that just lasts for a few seconds. It doesn't loop or do anything fancy, so we don't really need to have the stingers included in this music aggro event. This music aggro event is a sort of dynamic looping situation, or at least we will make it so shortly. So this is the one that's kind of looping and changing dynamically according to what's actually happening in the game. And what we're going to do is we're going to set up the stingers in such a way using mixer snapshots, so that if the stingers are triggered, for example, if you pick up a weapon or open a door in the game, and then you're still being chased by the enemies, or there's still aggro on the enemies, the music aggro event is going to be temporarily overwritten by the stinger, because the stingers are more important. They're signifying more important moments in gameplay where you progress and you open, you unlock, and you pick up things and all that kind of thing. So the aggro music, the looping music, doesn't really need to, it needs to kind of give way, if you like, to the stinger music at those points. So I'm not going to put the initial spawn and the death stingers, or the pickup or progression stingers. They're not going to be in the main music level. So essentially, I want this event to just play, and it's going to loop because it's got this blue loop region, and there's no conditions on there. So that'll loop, and that's the same loop that I've basically copied and pasted multiple times. And the reason for this is because I want there to be like a holding area here, where when the music starts, nothing is really happening until we have an instruction to send the play cursor to one of our different levels. Now we're not really using level 4, so that's, you can ignore the last one, but these 3 markers here, these are our destinations for when the parameter changes. And that is making use of these little things called, if you right click, you get these transition regions. So first you make the markers. So just, you can add a destination marker and then you name it like whatever you want to. And then you can make transition regions that will point to the markers that you've made. So that's what these are. So here's markers level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4. And these transition regions are going to basically just move the playback to these markers when the parameter condition is met. So let me just go in here and type 1.
Level 1.
So that's when the chomper is aggroed.
Level 1. Level 1. Level 1.
And if I go to 2, that will be the grenadier.
Level 2. Level 2. Level 2. Level 2.
And 3.
Level 3. Level 3. Level 3. Level 4.
So that's the basic idea of how that works. So we've got the same level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4 transition regions, and this is how we actually apply that condition. I know it's quite small to see, but the level 1 transition region has this parameter music added down here on 1. So it's only going to push it to 1 when this condition is met. And for 2, we can see it's set to 2 only, 3 is set to 3 only, and 4 is set to 4 only. So I set those 4 up there, and I copied and I pasted them across all these different regions. Now there is a little issue happening here. When I push it to level 1, it's supposed to just loop in this region. I want it to just, well, I might actually just move the loop region like this. so that it's actually catching the audio file that's in there. Now we're going to put a bit of music in there, so I'm not sure how big that's going to be, but essentially I wanted to just loop. But because I've got a level 1 transition region there, that's telling the playhead to go to this marker, and it's doing that continuously. So you need to subtract the level 1 within level 1, the level 2 within level 2, the level 3 in level 3, and level 4 in level 4, because otherwise it's just telling the cursor to just go to that marker and stay at that marker, and it doesn't actually allow it to play. So let me just try that again. Set it to 1, Chomper aggro.
Level 1. Level 1. Level 1.
Level 2.
Level 2.
Etc. And that's the basic setup. And you'll see there's another big transition region that covers all of those looping points. And we'll, like I say, we'll probably move these around. The big transition region at the bottom says it's going to go to the hold when, let me click on that again, when the parameter goes back to 0. So that's quite cool, because what it means is in Unity, there is something called a cooldown on the music, which means, cooldown is a general term, which means that when the chomper aggro is lost, in other words, when the chomper stops chasing the player, rather than that parameter going from 1 to 0 straight away, this aggro cooldown is basically a number of seconds that that are added on before it goes back to 0. And the reason that you might want to do that is so if your player is going just out and in of the aggro distance of the chompers, it might re-trigger and it might be strange. So by adding a bit of cooldown, it just keeps the music playing a bit longer, so it doesn't keep interrupting and re-engaging. But I'm going to put that at 0 for now, but that is something that I've exposed there from the script so that you can actually change it later, and you can see the music parameter name should be set to music by default, which is within the music aggro event. So this should basically work. All we need to do, well, there's a few little things that we need to do. First of all, we need a track. I think it would be really helpful to just get a track. And you can use whatever you like. Now, I should say that when it comes to music, there's these things called stems, which are individual microphones from the recording. So if I was to say, I want the stems for a music track, what that means is I want to go and get the music track broken down in layers of all the different drum microphones, the guitars, the bass, and whatever other instruments are going on. You don't have to use stems. It's just that stems make it really easy to do what we call sort of vertical composition. So vertical composition is when we have multiple audio tracks and we have, like, let's say guitar, drums, and then just bass. Let's just say that. It might be that the guitar is looping here, let's say, and then when a bigger enemy comes along, it might permit the drums and the bass to come in, because perhaps there is conditions, for the bigger enemies to trigger those drums and bass instruments, which come and go. And this modulation AHDSR is a great way to add really nice smooth fades when instruments come and go. So that would be like a vertical approach. Everything has to play back in time. So actually you wouldn't necessarily condition it out. What you would do is you would probably automate it out on the music track, because otherwise things will go out of time. So you'd just fade in the guitars when the certain condition is met. Perhaps when you go to a big boss fight, it might trigger parameter 3, so you'd kind of have something like that, and the volume would come up, and maybe you'd slow it down, and you might add a bit of seek speed to slow down the parameter. But that's just vertical composition. We're not going to go that direction, because it's really good, but it requires you getting the stems for a track, and it can be quite hard to get a track that you really like that has stems. So I'm just going to use this one here, which is called Hitman by Kevin MacLeod. So if you Google Kevin MacLeod Hitman, Kevin MacLeod is probably one of the most famous composers for royalty-free music. He's just very, very prolific. And I think this is a good track to use because it has a bit of a shift and has different bits that we can chop up and edit, and that's what I'm going to do. So go down to this Chosic website here, download free MP3, press download. You can preview the track. It's quite nice. It's yeah, just fun, and we're probably going to get sick of whatever track we use, but go ahead and download that, and we'll use this one. So once we've downloaded the track, we can keep the debug voice there if we want to. I'll just mute it. It might be useful for later, but I'm going to just I might just drag the track in here, and I can just expand it out and I can see the whole track here. And I need to make decisions about what bits I want to trigger for different bits of the song. So I'm just going to go through and do a bit of, I suppose, editing here. It's not very good to do editing in Fmod. I mean, it's much better to do this in Reaper, but just for the sake of time, I'm just going to do this right now. So let's have a listen. And it doesn't matter where the parameter is because there's no transition region. Nothing's going to force the play cursor here, irrespective of where what's playing. This parameter, it's not going to work because there's nothing above it waiting for that input and forcing. There's no transition region here forcing the play cursor to a certain point. So yeah, I'm going to try and divide this MP3 up into these different areas, and of course the aggro has 3 levels to it. So the stingers are all more incidental type moments, whereas the music aggro needs to have 3 loops. So let's just see what we've got here. Okay, so that's nice. I might just make a little split there. So that's like the main theme. We don't want to have that going too much. It'll get quite repetitive. This bit is nice. Okay, so let's use that bit for maybe the chomp. Quite an aggressive riser there. Just see if we can get something looping here that kind of works. What you can do with these with loops, you can right-click them, add a little transition timeline, and you can drag the handles of the edges into itself and actually loops with a smooth transition. Now, that's going out of time. This takes a bit of trial and error because ideally we would know the tempo of the song and we would put in beat markers and everything. But I'm just trying to do this really, really quickly for you so that you can get something going on without having to do all that stuff. I might actually delete that that crossfade from now because it actually makes things kind of get a bit complicated with that. So I'm just going to try and avoid doing that for now. I'll just set it to a simple loop and maybe put some fades on. It's not going to be the prettiest thing, but just for the sake of getting this going, we've got some region there that's going to loop. So we've got our, let's say this is our spawn stinger. And this is our chomper loop. What else do we have? So there's a really nice shift here. So I'm just going to use this again. This is all very crude what we're doing here. There's another shift there. So yeah, just for the sake of this demo, we could use this shift for level 2, which is the Grenadiers, and this one for the Spitter, because it just gives a nice escalation of things. Interesting. Really dramatic, but essentially that works quite nicely for like a death sound. And we can just chop this up, and we can just say that this is our pickup sound. And this one, This one's going to be our progression. So we're just basically harvesting this. I can't cut and paste, but I should be able to copy and paste. So this is going to be the Stinger of Death. Just get rid of that debug voice, put it there. And this is going to be the progression. Might be too long, but we'll just see. We'll just get something going on first. This was going to be the spawn. And what are we missing? We're missing the pickup. So this one is the pickup. Just to get something going on. Now we've kind of harvested this audio file, and we can see that we've got our kind of three main looping sections. So let's just see if we can get something kind of going on here. Now everything's getting bunched up, so what I need to do is just do a bit of housekeeping. These test voices, don't really need them right now, but I'm just going to drag this loop region. Can I not drag those all together? You'd think you'd be able to do that, wouldn't you? We're going to have to adjust this because, yeah, it's not going to loop particularly well. But that's okay. We'll just crack on and let's see. I will just get these out of the way. Make sure the end is out of the way too. Get our next loop. I can put these debug voices in the right place as well. Let me just see if it's the right one. Level 1. Also, I like to name the files properly so you can actually see what's going on. It does take a bit of time to do all this kind of thing. There's no two ways about that. Music is quite involved. It really adds a lot in though, because when the music is reflecting the gameplay, everything just really feels tightly integrated and responsive, and it just makes everything more satisfying because you can actually hear when you're safe and you can hear when you're in danger even before you can even see enemies. So it does really pay off. But yeah, it does take a bit of time to get everything going. And I want to make sure that I've got nothing on the end here, because otherwise when the playhead is forced to the end, the event might actually not release, although this event should pretty much stay active for the whole thing anyway. So that's all looking good. We've got audio on here as well, and all the debug voices are muted, so let's just see what happens when I play this from the start. I'll double click stop to get the cursor back to the start. Press play, nothing should happen. And I'll bring the volume down a bit, and I'm going to set this now to 1. Cool, so we've encountered our chompers. And let's pretend that we're going to the bit in the level where we have our Grenadier, which we're going to do in a minute, which is like a boss. I'm going to set this to the parameter that corresponds to that encounter, 2. Now, what we can notice there is that change is quite abrupt. So we can add in a tempo marker if we know the tempo of the song. I believe this is 75 BPM. And what this does is, if we drag it back to the start, you can see it's doing something really crazy with the ruler. It defines the bars and the beats. So if we move our audio to a bar, then the grid lines should actually match up to the audio more or less. And let's just do that here as well. Make sure that it's on a multiplication of 4. So 4, 8, 12, 16. You can see there, and I'll just put this to 20, and not 20. Sorry, 24. Whoa, thinking about it. Didn't want to do that. Oh, it's because this is already there. So maybe I'll just can I just control? Should be able to control click everything and not move the hold. Make sure that's on 24. La-di-da. And the reason that this is important is because it should help us get really smooth transitions, because these transition regions can be told to wait until the bar to actually make their transition. So you can see when you do this, it introduces these grid lines, and like I say, this is going to be quite rough because we haven't really spent the proper time in Reaper to prepare these assets, but the hope is that the transitions will happen more smoothly on the beat. So let's just audition that again. Play 1, and I'll set it to 2, and it should kind of wait for the beat. We'll see. 2. Now there's room for improvement there for sure, and I'm not sure if I have the tempo completely right or if it's just a case that this is slightly offset. So you can see it's just a bit offset. These kind of little tweaks will help it feel more smooth. It should be right on the money really. I'm not sure about these either, but that should, let's just try that, see if that works a bit better. Set it to 0, set it to 1, then set it to 2, 2. Yeah, I think it's working pretty well. It's just that there's some janky fades in here, so it's not actually doing it as smoothly as it should, but the timing is not too bad. Okay, so it's good enough. It's good enough for now, for this. So there we go, that's all ready. And we can test this in the game. Before we go and test it, why don't we just double check that at least the spawn and death, well maybe the pickup as well. And if you go to the Unity guide, quite a while ago we looked at how to add in basic sounds for basic interactions. And it's just the same thing. We're just going to piggyback off how these things are set up in the game already. So for example, taking the staff or taking the weapon from the pedestal, there is a staff take trigger, and let's just have a look at that in Unity, and we are going to just piggyback from that. So there's different ways of finding it. Of course, you can fly over to the pedestal and select it, or you can just select it in the hierarchy if you know what you're searching for. Here it is. So we can see there's already well, I've actually done this myself. I've put in this second emitter, but there's already the initial interaction sound effect that I have that plays, which is actually probably using a test voice right now. But the original sound effect is fine. That's set to trigger enter because it is a trigger box. it's a collider that has its trigger, and it already has a trigger script for the game that we didn't put in, that was already there. So we're kind of piggybacking on that, and we're just adding an event emitter for our normal sound effect, but I'm also doing the same thing for the music and just setting it to our music event by dragging that in from Stinger pickup. So that's actually going to work as far as Unity is concerned. It should do anyway. But we just have to come back to Fmod and check how things are set up, because we don't know what's going to happen as it is if these Stinger events play when the music is playing. So we need to look at the mixer for this, and we need to set up some sorts of hierarchies. Now, you can see I've got something going on here already. I've already done the basic kind of job of making sure that I have a group for the, I call it the aggro, MX aggro and MX sting, and they're actually nested as children underneath the MX group. And that means the music slider, if I change that, it will change both these children. So that is the kind of logical way to do that. But what I want is for these Stinger events to override the music aggro event. So this, I want this fader, when there's a Stinger, I want this to come up and this to go down. So how do we do that? Well, first of all, we do this housekeeping of putting the Stingers under the MX Sting, putting the music aggro under MX aggro, making sure they're both children of group parent MX. And then in the snapshots, I'm going to make a new overriding snapshot called Stinger. And let's just put it up there. And I'm going to just duck away the music. I think that's all that I need to do, because I can leave the Sting, MX Sting fader is already up. Let me just show you how to get back to the mixer. There's two ways of doing it. You can click off, or you can click the little X here and it goes back to mixing desk. That Sting fader is on 0 anyways, so it should play the Sting music without us having to bring up that fader, but it is actually better practice. You get like a smoother result when you actually scope it in, it's called. But so clicking the sliders here is actually called scoping in. You can scope it in. Scoping in just means that that's going to change when the snapshot enables. So that is now done. Let's see if this works. There may be something that I need to come back and do again, but there's nothing stopping you from actually testing this in the game now. But I haven't actually put my Stingers in here in terms of the snapshot. Remember, we looked at this before. We need to actually make the Stinger instrument. And then, and this is probably going to be something that we'll tweak, but we can add on this envelope here. And I'm actually just going to copy that track. I'm lazy, I like to just copy things. So just make sure that the snapshot covers the duration of the Stinger. And I'm going to press F7, which is going to build, and let's see what happens here. Back to the aggro. I'll just keep that there. Live update is going to listen for Unity. Sometimes you just need to rerun this. This little scan needs to happen sometimes when events get renamed. I renamed the music event, and I think it's still needing to kind of update that reference to the new music event, and hopefully it should work without any complaints once this scan is complete. And then I think you have to close that. So let's press play and see what happens. It's quite a long video at this stage, 40 minutes. Okay, oh, I've lost the mouse. I'm going to connect that. Live update should now connect. And of course, if I want to, I can, oh, what am I doing? Window profiler, press record, and you'll see that the music aggro event is actually running. So back to Unity, minimize this so I can see that parameter on the bottom is coming through, hopefully. While I play the game, I'll just make it a bit easier to see what's going on. Okay, so let's turn off the gizmos. Let's find some chompers and see what happens. Or, let's find the chompers and then pick the staff up. These are some stupid chompers, oh my god. Okay. Oh no, I can't kill them because I don't have a weapon. Aha! Alright, things are working. I think the issue is that the crossfade from the stinger back to the music is quite abrupt. So pick up this 1 second. Well, I think what happened is the 1 second means that it takes a second for the stinger. Let me just show you, it's easier. It takes a second for this fader, the sting fader, to come on and come off and bring back the music one. But when it's coming off and bringing back the music one, I think it's actually running out of audio to play there. So I might just make it shorter, like this. I just want to be really clear about this, just to avoid confusion, that because this reflects the onset or the intensity of the snapshot as per this intensity envelope, this snapshot here is going to induce, it's going to take a second to induce, and the shape here means that it's going to induce quickly or slowly or evenly. And that means when it reaches the end, it actually takes also a second for it to fall off. So that means here, around about here, there's going to be a second where the snapshot kind of is fading out, meaning this is going to slowly fade out in relation to the music underneath. And you can see that when I press play. When the play cursor leaves the edge of this, you'll see it remain active for about a second. So let's have a look. So that means the mixer faders are actually taking a second to kind of swap over. And we might actually even be able to see that if we, let's have a look. We should be able to see what the mixer does if we select the snapshot. So hopefully that clears up how that snapshot actually works in the context of the event and the intensity envelope. Now, so in order to make sure a sound plays at the very first initial load, I want to make sure that the spawn sound, I'm going to copy that and make sure that it's at the start of the music aggro. And what I'm going to do is move the loop points for that just away so that it will play reverb on the main channel, and it'll hold, but it'll keep it away. And what this means is that if I trigger the music, let's say there's a fight, so I go into 1, and then if I go back to 0, which by the way is this hold transition timeline, which I've set to 1, if I go back to 0, it gives a nice little, yeah, like it kind of transitioned back to no aggro. So I'm just going to build that. And while it's doing that, by the way, I'm going to just make sure, well, I have made sure that the Fmod emitter is added to the particle system of the door huge 1, which is something that we looked at before. That's how we make the sound of the door opening. So I can just add it in there and make sure it's set to enable Stinger progression. So let's see how far we can get here. I'm just going to turn the profiler on, make sure that it's capturing the parameter at the bottom of the screen so we can see what's going on. Make sure it's selected. Here we go. Oh, let's just dive into the acid for a second. Cool, so we've got something going on there, and those are the stingers, by the way. The first time we load into the level, it's actually, it's this one here in Music Aggro, but then subsequent respawns, it's actually coming from the player controller, because I've just added those in as simple play one-shot instructions as you would do for a normal sound effect. Let's aggro these. Come back and interrupt the music. Cool, that works pretty well. Okay, so that really lifted that sense of progression there when that door opened, and just really gave a nice lift to everything, because the normal kind of combat aggro music is quite low, but when that progression stinger hits, it really lifts everything, and it really, it's probably too loud, but now we can see the chompers have lost sight of us, so that they're retreating in the distance. And because we have this nice bit, which is basically the same thing as what triggers when we, what was it, the spawn? Yeah, we put that kind of spawn music back in the start, so the game and Fmod basically are doing the same thing. So I can simulate that by just pressing 1 here. And then bringing it back to 0. Wait for the bar. So one more thing I'll do, just in case we have aggro very quick after that point of just going back to having no aggro, I'll just make sure that the those transition conditions are covering that as well. So that's basically it. We have an aggro system now where we've got a music underscore aggro music event that plays dynamically, but we have stingers that override it. So if we're in combat and any of these stingers happen, such as death, pickup, progression, it's going to override the main music, and it gives a really nice result. So that's basically it in terms of the music. It can be much more complicated, but that works. It's a bit janky, like the transitions need a bit of work, but you can go and smoothen those out by just spending more time actually rendering the files precisely in Reaper. Make sure that the Reaper BPM matches the backing track BPM, which I think is 75. Let me just go on this, I'll show you this, there's a BPM check website. I'm just going to go here and I'm going to drag in the song I downloaded. Whoops, got this weird pop-up. Don't accept. Select files. I think it's 75. You want to make sure that Reaper is set to the same BPM, and oh, it's 153, which is twice 75, so it's 76.1. So it's just a bit over. So maybe set it to 153 instead. And that means that in Reaper you're able to snap to the grid and get those exports really, really quite precise, so that you're not having to do it in Fmod, which, as you can see, is just very tricky in terms of editing audio. You don't get great results, which is why this isn't perfect. but it would normally be done in Reaper, and then it makes life so much easier. And then you just set the BPM here to be the same, and everything locks up nicely. So that's it really in a nutshell, and you can see how much it adds to the game, and I'll leave it there for now.